Hi, everyone. My name is Corbin. I'm with CoderPad, and today we're going to be talking with Santosh Yadav about Angular's past, present, and future. We're going to talk a little bit about his story, some stuff. It's the reunion, yes. We're going to be talking a little bit about Angular's past, like what's happened in the past, a little bit about what's happening in Angular today, particularly with Angular 14, and potentially a little bit about what is going to happen in Angular in the future. I'm excited to have him on, so let's get it going. Santosh, how you doing?
Hey, Corbin. Hi. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to have you on the stream. I've seen a lot of your videos in the past. Of course, you host Tech Talks with Santosh. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of introduce yourself and tell the people kind of who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone. So my name is Santosh, and I am currently in Hamburg, but I'm basically from India. And a little bit about myself. I mean, I work on Angular, of course. I mean, if you see me on social media, I just talk about Angular. So it proves that I work on Angular, and I've been involved in Angular for a long time. So I'm one of the Google developer expert for Angular. Apart from that, I'm also a GitHub star, and I'm part of Auth0 Ambassador program as well. I'm a YouTuber, and I was hosting Twitter Spaces. I mean, when a few months back, but currently it's a little bit difficult situation. So I'm staying away from this. I think this is the first stream after more than a month. So I'm just making my comeback.
Well, we appreciate you joining us for that all the same. Your Twitter Spaces are always awesome. Every time you host one,
Thank
I
you.
swear I can't go 2 seconds without seeing more people tweet about it and how much excitement there is around them.
Thank you.
Yeah. So man, you mentioned you're a Google developer, you're a GitHub star, you have a YouTube, you do Twitter Spaces. It kind of seems like you do it all. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how you became a Google developer expert, how you became a GitHub star, what projects you've been involved in with open source. Tell us a bit about how you ended up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story. So I started my career back in 2008. So I completed my engineering actually in 2008. And believe me, in 2008, I think, I'm not sure, but there was only way to get involved in coding, read books. I'm sure you might have been through that phase as well. But early in 2008, internet was like, okay, YouTube was coming. It was not primarily for education. There were not enough platforms, and it was hard to actually like study code, right? I mean, books and that's it, and documentations, they were not that great. So I was a .NET developer when I started my career back in 2008, and uh, I would say I struggled a little bit to get a good job. So my first job was, of course, nothing exciting. I just took that job because I needed some experience. So my salary was like $800 per year
Mhm.
at that time in 2008,
Wow.
and I was not actually doing a .NET. I was doing ASP. So I was
Mhm.
doing. I mean, I was not writing that much code, but I was doing other stuff like building the ASP project, taking it to the client, showing them okay what we have built. So it was really odd. I mean, of course, the company had no product to build, and he was just actually probably he was just doing time pass, I would say. The CEO of the company, because his primary business was something else, and this is like something he was trying. Okay, if he knew that okay, this the software market situation is really bad, so he can get developers for whatever money he wants. He can pay them cheap and then get the job done. So I was like, I realized that okay, there are two things. I can invest my time here, right,
Mhm.
and get that whatever like money I'm getting, or leave it and try somewhere else. So after few, I've like 9-10 months, I decided to leave, and then I was jobless for a few months. I think
Mhm.
it was over a month, and then I got some contract thing, and worked there for 4 months, and it was again not that technical. I mean, I worked on Oracle database little bit,
Okay. Yeah.
and then finally 2011, 2010. Yeah. So early 2011, sorry, 2010 or 11. Yeah, it was 2010 actually. So
Hmm.
I got into one place where I got involved with .NET again. So it was Microsoft, Windows platform. So I was working on Windows as a Windows developer.
Huh.
So I loved it. I mean, Windows is pretty simple to understand. You don't have to worry about lifecycle looks. Just click on button, it generates the lifecycle, it generates the like code behind event, and you can write your code, right? So
Hmm.
it's much simpler than what web is.
Uh-oh.
That company
Please.
again worked there for 10 months again because uh, it was, I think that was the period where the situation was getting better. I mean, people will like now really started getting good jobs. So I was like, okay, I'm still not getting that paid that much. And even my, I know before I left, so one of the vice president of the company, he was vice president, I think, yeah. He came from Pune because, of course, it was a big company. And he came from Pune and he asked me, I heard you are leaving. Why? I was like, this is what I'm getting paid. And he was shocked. I could
Hmm.
literally see he was shocked. What? I was like, yes, this is what I'm getting paid. And then he left. He understood that I'm not going to stay with this salary, not possible.
Yeah.
So I left that and then I got 100% hike. Actually, the new job where I joined, and at that moment, actually, I had an option to join Book My Show. You have you heard about Book My Show? It's
Mm-mm.
one of the actually companies in India who introduced this platform for movie bookings. So they were
Okay.
the first one, and but I couldn't join them because it was like too much travel for me, and I
Hmm.
ended up doing something else. So I joined a bank again, like on a contract position, and worked there for few months. So I never worked for a year till now. So it was early 2011. I didn't work for a year even. So left that again and joined a startup. So at that moment also had like offer from TCS. So I was like, okay, should I join TCS or join this particular startup? Spoke to my friend. He said, look, don't go to TCS. I mean, ask them about the project, and I did. I asked about the project, and glad that I didn't join it because it was a shitty project. So it was
Right.
.NET 1.1. So
Oh.
even it was not C Sharp, which I used to love writing. It was
Yeah.
VB.NET. VB. I think most of the developers might have started their journey with VB, Visual Basics.
Hmm.
So it was VB.NET Project 1.1. I was like, okay, no, just I don't want to. And then I ended up at the startup. I realized, okay, there is a lot of things to do. And so when I joined, I whenever I used to get some work, so I used to do it quickly and deliver it. So my one day my team lead, she was a girl. So I went to her. Okay, I've done this as well. She was like, sit, Santosh, please sit. She was like, look, I don't have enough work for you. Please don't do this fast. Take your time. I mean, I also need some time to actually find new work for you. So
Right.
I was like, okay, because I was too much excited, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
been 3 years. I have never worked. I mean, believe me, the places where I worked before that, I had worked for like few months, and then there was long time no work. I was just doing sitting idle, reading something. But how far? I mean, for how long you can just read, right? I mean, of course, I used to like write some code, read the documentation, but it gets boring after time, right?
Right.
If you're not getting actual business use case to solve. So I was like, okay. And then I realized, okay, I have to take my time. So I started with taking more work. I realized, okay, this is the work, okay. But as a startup, they have a lot of problems to solve. And I
Hmm.
realized that. And then I started getting involved, uh, pretty much doing everything. And then I was again doing Windows development. So they had a platform. It was like configuration where, you get points on your credit card purchases, and that was the business model. So the platform I was working on was the backend of the entire process, where we used to configure, okay, how much points on every purchase you will get, and what can be the slabs in case you purchase between this and this, what points to give. So it was
Hmm.
like configuration windows, and I was like, okay. I mean, so I did it for quite, I think, close to a year. And then one day, my manager came and he said, we are building a new team and we are going to do ASP.NET MVC. I was like, and it will be a front end. So I know you are always interested to do some web development. So are you onboarded? I was like, yes, why not? I mean, so after a long time, I'll be doing web development. Yeah,
Hmm.
but I didn't knew what I'm signing up for, right? So uh, it was like, okay, we started doing that, and then we realized that we have to use JavaScript, and that was the first time I was like writing JavaScript. So jQuery. I think
Yeah.
most of the developers, early developers, use jQuery, and for a longer period of time, of course, I thought that dollar something is very JavaScript. I mean, it's how we write JavaScript code, and then
Hmm.
later I realized, oh no, that was jQuery.
Right.
So started there. So we started doing web development. We did that project for like 6 months, and
Hmm.
then more responsibility came. So my manager said, "Okay, now we have almost closed this project. So I need someone to support it. So uh, can you lead the support team?" I was like, "Am I getting I mean, am I getting demoted or am I getting promoted?" So he's like, "No, you will have a team." I was like, "Wow."
Wow.
So ended up having a like support team for, so it was like 5 people team. And
Hmm.
as soon as I moved, I realized that there is not small work. I have a lot of things to do. So even invoicing part, how our data processing works, everything. So it was like, okay, now I had 1x work, now I have 10x work. And of course, I had a team to work with, and they were really nice. I mean, I loved working with that team. So they did that for a few years. Then people left the company. Of course, once people leave, and you are still there, so you get more responsibility. So I ended
Right.
up owning multiple departments now. So I was looking at support, I was looking at development, I was looking at invoicing, database. So I was like, okay, now what? I'm not writing code. I realized that no, this cannot continue. I mean, this if I love something about software engineering, it's writing code more than anything. So I left
Hmm.
that. I mean, so I decided not to stay. So it was almost close to 5 years I worked there. But yeah, I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. I have written about it. So uh, I think working long hours was something which I should have never done. But of course, I had my own reasons to do that. But
Of
ended up
course.
like, I mean, I ended up influencing others, which was not good. They they were just doing it because I was always there. So even uh, there was a time my team used to actually see, okay, I'm still in the office, and they used to stay, not because they have work. They just wanted to help because I'm there. I was like, I was of course loving that moment, but you realize after that, okay, what the hell? I mean, they should have enjoyed their time with the family, not with me.
Right. And
So
you've done a great job at writing a resource on that. I forget what the title was in particular, but you had done a retrospective on that time
yeah,
period, and kind of about hustle culture in general, because I think it's
yeah,
so pervasive within startups for this
exactly.
idea to work really, really long hours. Um, and while it can be beneficial in some ways, right? Like a paycheck and whatnot, right? It's definitely can be detrimental in other ways.
Exactly.
I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
I mean, of course, I mean, when I was doing it, I mean, of course, I had my own reason that, okay, I had like, I had a lot of loans to pay because whatever happened with my family. So my daughter was born premature, and I had like huge bills to pay. And my organization supported me. So they actually gave me extra money or gave me good raise every year to make sure that I can do that. But again, right, so I missed a lot of time with the family as well. I mean, I now I realize that what I have missed. I mean, and that was one of the reason as well for leaving the startup. I mean, my daughter was suddenly 4, and I was like, what the hell? I mean, I've hardly spent some time with her. I used to
Yeah.
be in office for like 3 days, 4 days, and even weekends. And then I thought, is that more important than actually getting more money? So now, actually, from past few days, I mean, of course, when you are doing nothing, you get you think about something, right? So past few days, I'm seriously thinking about writing another blog post that a lot of developers, right? So when they say, okay, I'm working long hours, they give a reason. They give a very specific reason. I'm doing it for family. But do your family really need that? I don't think so.
Right.
Your family need you. I mean, they need you to spend more time with. If you have a kid, they want you to be with them so you can play more with them, not so you can work in office for extra hours and then you don't spend any time with them. So I think those were the phases, but yeah.
And it's super challenging, right? Because I remember early on in my career, I have two younger siblings that I love as if they were my own kids, right? Just because, I help babysit them at growing up and I remember early on in my career, I used to also work extremely long hours, like double overtime and a lot of it was very similar. I realized at the end of the day, I haven't seen my siblings in like a month, right? Like, not really, because like you'd come home for a certain period of time
Yeah,
and then I'd go right to bed, or like I'd have to get ready
exactly.
for work the next day or whatnot. Um, and it's challenging because, like when you're in that environment, to escape that situation can be so difficult and so scary even.
Yeah.
Um, so it's definitely a challenge, and yeah, I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah. I think
Um,
yeah, so things I think became better once I moved to Pune. You know
mhm,
Mumbai, right? I mean Mumbai is
yeah.
too much crowded and I had to travel a lot. I think I was traveling minimum
Mhm.
3 hours a day, uh, like to and from the office. So I decided to move to Pune, and after that, yeah, that's where it stopped.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, how did you get involved in Angular? Because obviously you'd mentioned that you've gotten involved in jQuery, right? So that's kind of your start of your JavaScript career.
Yeah,
What made you
yeah.
work towards Angular?
Yeah, it's actually when it was around 2015. We were exploring something new to work with. So one of my friend actually used uh, Angular in one of the projects. So he used Angular with Ionic framework. So you remember Ionic 1.0 was actually Angular JS specific. So it used to only support Angular JS.
Hmm.
And he did some apps. So I was like, I was really impressed what he did. So I thought of doing something on Angular JS. So before leaving that startup, I actually did a project on Angular JS. Of course,
Hmm.
management was not onboarded. They were like, no, we don't have that much time. I said, give it. I mean, I said, look, whatever time it takes to generally build one website, which we do, I'll do it in the same time frame because I wanted to do it. So I ended up doing that AngularJS project, and uh, then when I moved to another company in Pune, actually that was again AngularJS with .NET backend. So
Hmm.
I started working on AngularJS and then realized there is a new version which is coming up. So it was early 2017. Yeah, it was early 2017. So once I moved to Pune, by the end of the 2016, I had few like side gigs to teach AngularJS. So I started teaching AngularJS, and uh, uh, actually like by January of 2017 I started doing that. So I taught like AngularJS for some time and then realized there is a new version Angular coming, so I stopped doing AngularJS. I started teaching Angular. So before even I had a job in Angular, I was doing
Hmm.
full-time AngularJS as a job, and then I started with Angular 4. I think 2017 my March Angular 4 came, and around April or May, I picked up Angular 4 and started learning it. So I love TypeScript. I was like, oh my god, this like looks like .NET for me. So
Right.
because yeah, I've been writing .NET for a very long year, right, 8 to 9 years.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, it looks pretty similar, and I don't have to worry about all those undefined and a null.
Right.
I mean, it's a type language. So I was really impressed that what jQuery I wrote for years, and I used to get frustrated. I don't have to do that anymore. I
Right.
can use classes, I can use interfaces. So that's how I started like teaching Angular, and then of course I got like few more gigs to actually teach Angular, and I was making good money. And then I got a job as well. So I got a job to do full time Angular at Deutsche Bank. So it was around, yeah, 2017 October. So I joined them, and then they were building a framework. So I think that was a great learning curve because I was now getting to actually do full time Angular, and that was a huge framework as well. So did
Hmm.
that. 2017, I think I was like mostly involved in teaching Angular and doing Angular. And I realized that, okay, now my financial conditions is okay now. I mean, I was not making that much money, but I was able to pay my bills and like do some extra for my family, like to get my daughter into a good school. So I was like, okay, now what next? I think I'm
Right.
missing one thing, that I should get involved with the community. I should give back now because Angular has given me this much. I mean, I got a good life now. I mean, better than what it used to be, just because I
Hmm.
started learning. I mean, I'm making money out of it. So now it's time to give back.
Right.
But how? That was the question. I think
Always a
most of
question.
the yeah. So most of the new developers, I mean, who wants to get involved, they have this question, how? And I
Yeah.
was doing the same. And I decided to like explore things, but suddenly again we got another bad news. My daughter's health uh, was
Hmm.
she got some uh, TB, TB,
Yeah.
tuberculosis. Yeah, so
Hmm.
she had some symptoms. She was not diagnosed, but doctor said she has symptoms, so we have to do like 9 months entire medication. I was like, okay, so I couldn't do anything. So 2018 was like I just worked. That's it. I just worked in my day job. Even I stopped teaching Angular. So I was not in, like, of course, in my best mental health that time, because we were scared.
Yeah.
And so
Tuberculosis is
yeah,
terrifying.
actually. So we were like really scared. So 2018 I did nothing. So by the
Hmm.
end of 2018 things became better. Then I
Hmm.
started exploring that how I can do something for the community, and I came across a conference which was happening in 2019 in India. So I booked my ticket. I spoke to my manager. I asked him if he can ask the Deutsche Bank to sponsor, but I was not. I didn't realize that, okay, Deutsche Bank is never interested in doing all this stuff. They say that I shouldn't be saying online, but they say they are tech first, but they are not. I mean, they don't
Gotcha.
care about developers. So my manager said, "Look, it will be really difficult to get it approved." So I said, "Okay, no problem. I can pay from my own pocket. That's not a problem." So I booked my tickets, flight tickets. I booked my conference tickets. Went there. I really loved. I mean, it was a single day conference, so I went there. Like saw so many amazing developers giving talks, and end of the day I met. Vikram Subramaniam was there. So he used to work with Angular CLI team before.
Hmm.
And then I went to him and I said, look, I want to actually contribute to the Angular, but I don't know how. I mean, if you can give me some guidance, so it will be great. And by that time, I think around December of 2018, so I had started doing some stuff. I mean, I started like building projects and putting it on GitHub. So I was like, okay, I mean, I'm doing something, but I don't know what. I'm building the project and putting it on GitHub, but where it will end. So I just asked him, okay. So he said, look, you can write blog posts, create video contents, and I mean, more around content. I was like, no. I mean, my goal is to actually be there in GitHub. I mean, the top 100 contributors,
Hmm.
because that's what comes on the first page, and I want to be there. And he was like, okay. So he said, yeah, you can actually help us with documentation. I was like, and I also like got onboarded because, yeah, I mean, I know documentation was not that good when I started learning it, and
Hmm.
it was improving. So I said, okay, that sounds like a plan. Then went home, tried to find some issues, couldn't find any. I had heard about Ngrx, so I went to Ngrx and found one issue which I thought I can do, and fortunately, I was able to do it, and that's how it started.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, so you mentioned NGRX. Do you want to explain a little bit about like what NGRX is and why it's useful in applications?
Yeah, so NGRX is actually a state management framework, I would say.
Hmm.
And before I started using it, I mean, I actually made my first contribution even before I started using it. So it was like, okay, I made the contribution. Now let's explore the library, because I had heard about it from one of my colleague. So he said NGRX is really amazing, and that was way back in 2018. So it took me another year to actually realize how powerful NGRX is. So it made I mean, I realized, okay, this is something which I could have used in my application to manage the state, because it actually it makes your state as a like you have a global state, and you can put all your data into state, and whenever you want it, you can just fetch the data from the store. You don't have to like do state management using subject and behavior subject. That's very painful, right? I mean, you know how much code you have to write, and for every state you have to define variables, and then okay, I was like,
Hmm.
okay, this looks like a clean solution to me. And that's how I actually started even talking about Ngrx. So I said, okay, now let's see. I started reading about it, giving talks, and even my first conference talk was about Ngrx. So I went to NG Sri Lanka, and they were like doing their first conference, and I spoke about Ngrx.
That was your first talk. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know what your first talk was about because I'd seen that it was at that conference. That's super interesting. That's awesome. So what version of Angular did you start using NGRX with?
I think it was around Angular, so 2019, right? So I think it was Angular 9 or
Okay.
Angular 8. Yeah, it was Angular 8.
Hmm. So like that's a kind of big time difference from Angular 4 to Angular 8, right? Um, like I'd imagine that during that time you use like behavior subjects and other RxJS
Yeah,
stuff. So you had time to experiment and explore with alternative solutions and kind of
yeah,
realize, oh hey, NGRX actually solves some of these problems. It's a lot cleaner of a solution.
right.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, Speaking of big differences in Angular, obviously Angular has seen a ton of changes over the years,
Hmm.
both in terms of documentation and feature set, and even the tooling around Angular. What do you think some of the biggest changes in Angular have been since you started? And what do you think some of the best changes have been?
I think I love how easy they are making it, and the developer experience which they are introducing, right? So in earlier days, the errors were like too random, right? I mean, of course, there is some error, but I mean, you have to actually go ahead and like search for it. And over the years, like your Angular language service has become so much powerful that it tells you, okay, this is the error, go ahead and fix it. So that's one amazing stuff. I mean, being writing code from Angular 4, I can see that difference. Another one was around the injectables, like services, provided in. So, so in past, we used to always get this error, okay, no provider found for this and that.
Right.
And then they introduced in Angular 6 that they by default, the provided in is in root. So you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about that error anymore. And after that, I think that was in Angular 6. And in Angular 6, they also launched the Angular libraries. So you can actually have monorepos. That was a good, I would say, good addition.
Right.
Because before that, I mean, we built our first framework at Deutsche Bank in Angular 4.
Hmm.
And it was hard to build libraries at that time. So we had to do all this manual setup. We ended up using Grunt at that time. No, it was not Grunt, it was Gulp. So we ended up using Gulp, and some random, of course, the files which we had to generate, ng package and all those stuff. I think ng packager was already there before Angular 6 came in, and uh, so Angular 6 adding those libraries, it made my life easier as some because I was the one who was responsible for releasing the libraries and adding new features, and it was always a pain to build again. I mean, if there is a new change, I have to actually go ahead and again do some hacking, right? Because Angular
Right.
was already using its own CLI and all those stuff, but CLI did not support it building libraries at that time. So once they moved on to like when they introduced libraries, I ended up actually migrating everything to Angular CLI. So I threw out that gulp whatever setting we had.
Right.
So and apart from that, of course, Angular IB, we speak a lot about it, and people say, okay, there is no visible difference, but I would say it actually unblocked the Angular team in doing a lot of stuff, making your developer experience a lot better. You can get all those errors at compile time because Angular IB unblocked the team from doing that. Earlier, it was not possible, right? So Angular IB introduced the concept of what you can say. Uh, Concept of locality, right? So you know
Mhm.
what is being executed where.
Right.
Probably it doesn't matter to most of the developers, right? So they just want to write the code, but it unblocked the Angular team for like to give you a better developer experience. I remember
Hmm.
when Angular 9 came in, a lot of developers were like, it says it should improve my bundle size, but it is not. I was like, dude, that's not the only thing, right? You
Right.
see the error codes. I mean, it is making your life easier. Of course, Angular IB was supposed to. It will help your bundle size in case you have a large app. For small apps, it will not make any difference,
Right.
and
Right.
which never did. And apart from that, I think now with every version they have been introducing a lot of a lot of different things, and introducing this Angular roadmap was a great step,
Oh
because
yeah.
I know always community had this problem, right? Angular is not listening to us. Angular team is not listening to us. We want this, but they are not listening to us. How to? I mean, people used to reach out to me even when I was working with the one of the client, and he was like, they were like, why actually Angular team never listens to anyone? I mean, they do what they like. I was like, yeah, I can understand because of course there is nothing in public, right? And roadmap actually made it pretty clear. Okay, this is what we are doing, and that was a great step. I would say more better than what I mean. Of course, introducing new features is fine, but letting them know that okay, this is coming is much better when it comes to the community.
Right. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that like when we talk about the progression of Angular, like of course there's Angular CLI and there's Angular core, right? But I mean there's also router features that have been added, like lazy
Right.
loading, I think is a big one that was like kind of like this big thing. And then even like Angular material and the CDK have grown substantially in the past
Yeah.
few years. And it's been really cool to see the ecosystem as a whole grow and change.
Agree.
Um, so you mentioned that Angular IV, at least for smaller applications, doesn't tend to reduce bundle size much, right?
Right.
And from my understanding, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, some of that is because of how tree shaking works.
Mm-hmm.
Could you describe tree shaking a little bit and like how it can help reduce your bundle size?
Yep, sure. So I think lazy loading was there for in Angular for a longer period of time, but uh, lazy loading is to reduce the bundle size. But tree shaking is something which reduces the dead code from your code base, right? So you, as a developer, we write code, we add more code than we delete, and that's
Hmm.
true, right? In enterprises, even people know that okay, this code is not used, but they will leave it as it is. I mean, as we say, I mean, don't touch anything which is working. so,
Right, right.
so I mean, that's pretty common in software development, and this is where actually I really love about Angular that they introduced this concept of injectables with provided in root, which can where actually Angular team at build time, not Angular team but framework can at build time can recognize okay if this service is used or not. If there are no references, it will just remove that code, and it does with lot of your codes. I mean, you don't know, but actually Angular framework can actually, or you can say the CLI can figure out okay what part of the code is being used and what is not being used, and it can reduce or remove that part, that code you can say, from your final
Right.
bundle. That's tree shaking.
And I think it's important to keep in mind is that like tree shaking isn't just useful when it comes to like multiple like oh you have a bunch of code that you didn't touch, right? Like it's also useful when you're using libraries
Yeah,
because then what
exactly.
can happen is you can remove the code in the library that you're not
Yeah,
currently using.
right.
So instead of like a 100 kilobytes, you can reduce it down to a couple kilobytes, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I know that's not the only trick in Angular to help you reduce bundle size. You mentioned lazy loading a little bit,
Yeah.
and I think there's a few other things that you can do. I'd love to hear about some other ways that you can reduce bundle size and what they are.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Of course, the lazy loading is most preferred one. So what you can do is you can delay loading of your code. I mean, so lazy loading is, I mean, of course, it comes with a lot of configuration. You can actually have, you can load in background. So I mean, it checks if your users are idle, and then you can load the code. But what it does, it lazy loading create multiple chunks. So generally, when you build an application, you create like, or you import all the modules into your app module, and at the end what you end up is with a large chunk which won't be probably used when user is interacting with your application. So lazy loading allows you to do that in case there is some part of code which will be used later on, you can just like create a separate chunk, and once user starts interacting or once user requests for it, the code will be downloaded. So it you can reduce the initial load size of your application, right? Apart from that, try to use, I mean, in case you are using third-party libraries, try to actually again, you can use import, right? Native import to actually lazy load them as well. That's a nice trick in case you want to try that out if you have any big library. For example, we had one library called Google Phone Number or Google Phone Lib something,
Oh,
which is actually a huge library. So I was working on the application. I was like, okay, why my application size is so huge? So it was like, it. I think it was not optimized because the library itself says that this is not optimized, and so it was around 500 KB in production. And I
wow.
was like, wow, 500 KB, and we are loading it. So and I replaced that with like a native import. So I was loading it once that particular screen was used. So you can
Right.
do that with huge libraries, like where you don't have any other option. Of course, there are some libraries which is optimized, but there are libraries which you need, but they are not optimized for production use. You can actually do this. Use native import, delay the loading until unless you need it. And apart from that, I mean, always check when working with Ngrx store, right? We also make this thing that we try to import everything into global state. So don't do that. I mean, split them into multiple feature modules, and
Right.
of course you are doing lazy loading, so import them into your lazy loaded modules. Don't try to, because if a lot of developers are, they don't want to do it, but they are scared. Okay, what if I do it lazy load it? I mean, what, how my data will work? I mean, will I get the data when it is needed? So they actually add some everything into your app module, right?
Right.
And they just end up with a huge chunk. So I did that practice as well in one of the client app, where entire store was loaded, and there was lazy loading, but entire store was like a single module. And then
Right.
I ended up like splitting them. Realized, okay, this part is not being used here, so split them into multiple chunks, and it reduced the bundle size again.
And
Uh,
something about that trick is that not only does it reduce bundle size, it also reduces memory size, right? Because
yeah,
I remember
correct.
when I when I was working in a startup from one of my first jobs, we were using Angular, and we had everything in global state. It didn't matter whether it was a component
Yeah,
variable or a local variable or anything. It was all in global state. And I remember if you clicked around to some of the pages, you never unloaded the memory because it was in global state, right? So what
yeah.
ended up happening is that like we had something like 800 megabytes of data
Wow.
from our website in memory, right?
Wow.
Because we didn't do paging, we didn't do like it
Understood.
was one of those situations where it was like, yeah, we really need to be using feature-based storage. So to your point,
Yeah, and one other trick which I found, actually I was working on one of the client app, and it was like the bundle size was around 8 MB. So I was like, oh my God, why? Why it is so huge? So I
yeah,
started with, of course, these lazy loading and all those stuff, and I was able to reduce the main bundle size. I was able to cut it out from the rest. So I ended up again like with huge chunk, and I realized that some of the components, I mean, this is something which you can try using source map analyzer and see the component size as well, because some, I mean, when we optimize, right, we primarily focus on the, okay, what size of my bundles are, but did you ever check what size of your components are? So with source map analyzer you can actually see that. You can see the individual component, how much uh, size they have. And then using source map analyzer, actually I figured out, okay, there are a few components which is more than 500 KB. I was like shocked. I mean, why this component should be 500 KB? Doesn't make any sense.
right.
I mean, generally components are really small. I mean, and they were small. They were not big. So I ended up realizing that the way we are using style sheets, we are actually importing this entire style again and again and again. Uh,
Mhm.
because there was a reason. I think there was a reason. SCSS in Angular, earlier they don't used to support use.
Oh,
They
really?
had only import. Yeah, so I think it took long time to actually start using @use now. So now you can use @use with, I think, Angular. material 11 or 12. I don't remember the exact version, but yeah. So developers knew that okay, I have to import. So what to import? That's also a thing, right? I mean, you just cannot import your style sheet again and again. So they did
Right.
that. Actually, they had added this main style, which you have what you can say, the main theme file which you get in Angular material.
Oh
So they
yeah.
had added that import everywhere. I was like, okay, what if I remove it? So I was not sure. I mean, I'm not an SCSS guy, so I was not sure. But I thought like I'll start replacing them with the variables and uh, whatever files are needed. And I ended
Mhm.
up removing 2.5 MB like prod build. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. And then I wrote a blog post about it that, okay, this is something which I tried. You can try that as well. And it worked. And fortunately, so I joined another client after like leaving this client, and then they had the similar problem, and their bundle size was 32 MB. I was like, dude, you're lying, right? 32 MB. He
Yeah.
said yes, yeah. And I was like, that will be development build. He said no, it's a production build. I was like, my God, what you have done? And I saw the code base and oh, this is I just like wrote a blog post like 3 months ago on this. And
Hmm.
then we ended up reducing, I mean, just by doing that style sheet changes, we reduced it to 8 MB. So from
That's
32 MB to 8 MB. I was like, whoa,
huge drop. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so there are things which you explore and then it helps a lot. I mean, I was, of course, that was a great impression, first impression for the management as well. They realized, okay, this guy just came first week and he has reduced our bundle size by like 400, I think 4x, 8
Yeah.
into 4, 32, yeah. So he reduced the bundle size by 4x. I was like, yeah, yeah, I did that. But I knew, okay, I have already tried this solution. So that was pretty something new I figured out. Okay, now whenever I do optimization, I don't look at the bundle size. I also look at the component size. Which component is actually taking
Yeah.
lot of space. There are some time that due to images also, right? So a lot of companies use this inline image. You can also do that in inline images. So I
Hmm.
also found an issue where inline image was causing the component size to grow, and it was around 400 KB.
Right.
So I was like, okay, let's remove this and let's use optimized WebP or JPG format, which will of course not be 500 KB.
Yeah. Yeah. And by breaking it out to a dedicated image as well, if you wanted to, what you can do is you can add caching so that
Hmm.
when you go grab the image, you can then retrieve it from the cache as
Yeah.
opposed to having it in line. Um, Definitely some awesome tricks you just outlined. So we've talked a little bit about Angular's past, right? And some ways to optimize Angular applications. I kind of want to look at like what Angular is going to be doing here soon with Angular 14, if that's okay.
Hmm. Sure.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people are extremely excited about, because it's been a problem in Angular for many years, is typed forms, right?
Yeah.
I think the community as a whole has been rattling the cage and yelling at everyone and like, ah, we want type forms, we want type
Yeah.
forms. Can you explain a little bit about what type forms are and how they're going to be useful in applications?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, so earlier, whenever we used to create, like, let's say, a form using form group, right? So you generally don't define what kind of type your form will have, whether it will be string number. And due to that, whenever you like bind your form, you get errors, right? I mean, you get runtime errors. Now, the advantage of using TypeScript is you should get most of the errors at compile time, not runtime. And that's what makes your developer experience great. And Angular has been focusing on that from long time. So Angular 4 to whatever version came in, your errors are actually more on your like development time, right, rather than actually fixing it on your production side. So but this is one of the thing where you have to compile and see, okay, there is some error in the console, and then you used to fix it. So making like this forms like strongly typed will improve your, what you can say, the cycle to production. So you can like of course develop faster, and you know the types, what types are you are working with, so you don't get the wrong data type when you are trying to submit your form, because by default it's any, so any field you define, using form group or form builder. It's any. You don't have actually any specific type. And when you try to get the values as well by using whatever you use, if you use dot value or get raw value, again you get every field is type of any. It's just based on what you define in your input, right? If you say input type text, okay, you are getting it as a text, but it's kind of any. This is where it will improve. So you can actually now don't have to worry about that. You have the specific types available, and you can also make your validation much easier, right? It will make your validation will be you can show the errors. Of course, I mean, you most of the errors will be, of course, at the compile time when you work with it. So you know, okay, this is number, this is string, so I cannot do this operation or you cannot do that operation. So that is, of course, something which will work, and I think it will improve. I would say it will give much more flexibility to the libraries. I mean, so the developers who are creating libraries on top of forms, right? There was a lot of different solutions which are available, right? So before the type form came, I think Ngrx formally is one of them where
Yeah.
you can define the type.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it will make their life much easier now. There is a type of so they can work or they can reduce their bundle size whatever they have right now. So
Right.
more focus towards that. I think it's a good still it's I'm not sure because I saw the initial draft, and I think it's still not fully typed. I mean, it's there are some gaps, uh, but might have improved because it's been some time I have looked at anything. I mean, so I have to go ahead and see where that code is, because if I remember, it was around the errors where it was not still typed fully typed, but you can define it in your form group where it is typed. So whenever you work on your TS code, it's actually you get always some types associated with your fields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Um, the other feature that I've heard a lot about, especially from someone in chat right now, is standalone components.
Yeah.
Um, I I've heard a little bit about like what was it called? Scam modules,
Yeah.
or was it Scram?
Scam.
And yeah, Scam. Can you explain what Scam is? Kind of some of the history around like why standalone components is exciting, and then like what standalone components are and why they're exciting. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so for a longer period of time, of course, this Angular module, right? So we create a class called create a class and then decorate it with the @ng module, and we have to actually go ahead and register all the components which we use, all the components, directives, whatever we use, we have to go ahead and register them. And of course, coming from .NET background, I love that idea. I mean, that's why I actually even preferred Angular for a longer time.
Mhm.
So my of course my if I'm creating some code base, I want it to be organized, and ng module was the way to do that. That you can actually go ahead and organize all your components into a module, and then you can serve it. Like it's a feature. So you when you write .NET code, this is what you focus on. You create namespaces, right? And then namespaces can have n number of like different libraries, which is you are clubbing a feature, you are or grouping a feature. So for me, the concept was similar. Okay, I came to Angular and then I saw, okay, ng module. So it's okay. It's like a wrapper around my all the features, so I can club them together.
Mhm.
Then, of course, over the period of time, you have to just tell developers that, okay, this is what ng module does. This is what ng module does. I mean, they they don't have any idea that what I mean why ng module exists. So you have to tell them, okay, whenever you create a component, you have to register them. Why? Because that's how we do it. But someone who's coming from React or who, it's really strange for them, because why we should be doing that? Because we already have a component. So I think that first thing is mental model, right? So make new developers understand that why it should be working like that and why it should not. So I think that mental model is removed now. So you have like component, and you can just start using the component directly. That's what standalone component focuses on. It and one thing, ng modules are not going anywhere, because of course I will I always prefer using ng module where I have to club the features together. So let's say if I have a feature called product, and I know that there will be some more components, product list details, I will always prefer like creating a module and clubbing them together so I can use it outside, whether by I can lazy load it, or whether I want to actually serve it as a library to other developers, I will always prefer ng module. But for library authors, most of the time they don't have like large functionality, right? I mean, they have probably a few components which they want to give it to the developers. Still, they have to go ahead and create modules. I think that is removed now. So first point, I mean, it's really great towards making life easier for library authors. And web components, of course. So in Angular, of course, lot of companies are doing that. So they are creating web components and then using it in React or any other framework. It will make their life easier as well, because right now you have to actually go ahead and build all the modules to actually use them as a web component. Now we don't have to do that anymore. We can just take the component, publish it as your web component, and that's it. You don't have to worry about again. And in your day-to-day use cases also, I mean, so you have like your something called models, right? So of course, lot of projects, they may have some components which is like a model pop-up on something else.
Right.
They don't need module. I mean, we never needed module for that from day one. I mean, that was just an overhead. So I can just,
Mhm.
okay, create a model and then I can use it anywhere as a standalone component. I don't have to use ng module anymore.
Right.
So I think it will make the developer's life easier, but I'm a little bit scared that it probably doesn't creates a code base where it becomes more unstructured. For example, for large enterprises, I will still go ahead and suggest them to use ng module because it keeps my feature together. And that's what will be my focus on, and not to use standalone component everywhere.
Right.
Not creating ng module is not going to save you a lot of bundle size. I mean, if you're scared about bundle size, right? I have
Mhm.
seen it. I mean, it hardly saves 2 kbs. So if 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 you don't have any use case, don't try to use standalone component everywhere. Try to wrap them as a feature so you know, and then you can use them wherever you want.
Gotcha.
That's
Gotcha.
that's my thought. I mean, of course, there are other developers who can disagree with me. That's absolutely fine.
But and I think it's important to have that context, right? Like it's important to have nuance in these discussions as opposed to having all one way or another. Lars is in chat suggesting, Santosh, we have to have a battle deciding whether standalone or ng modules are the future.
Both
I would
are. I
watch
mean, yeah, both are. I mean, let's probably we can have a Twitter space in future, because I can see a lot of discussion going around it, and I think we need to discuss and tell community when and why, right?
Yeah.
When we should be using component and why we should be using it. So I think that's important.
Well, if you ever do the Twitter spaces, let me know. I'd love to
For
participate.
sure, for sure.
That's awesome. So I know that we are almost at time, but
Mhm.
I saw on Twitter the other day that you're working on an upcoming course about Angular.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about that. Obviously, you are an absolute expert in Angular. Can you tell us a little bit about the course and like what's going to be in it? What's the hook? Sauce.
Yeah. So I mean, I have of course learned Angular from going through some courses, right? So
Hmm.
all the courses which we have right now, they focuses on one functionality, right? So they will focus on, okay, how forms work, how routing works. So they are
Right.
separate courses altogether. So what I've tried to build is, when start from Angular CLI, we start with a new app. Then we introduce, let's say, okay, how binding works. Then we progress like slowly, right? So we introduce binding works, how data dependency injection works, and
Right.
then we introduce dependency injection. We talk about in depth, because I've seen most of the courses. Okay, this is how you write service, but what behind that, how your dependencies are getting like resolved, all those things are never discussed. And
Right.
I have learned that from, of course, documentation and reading blog posts, but not a course which is talking about it. So then we introduce dependency injection, we introduce RxJS progressively, then we introduce, okay, this is how you make HTTP calls. Then now let's bring forms, let's bring routing, and then we end up with entire like application. So generally this is, I would say, a course where you can like, entire thing, like entire Angular, most of the concepts which you need to use in your enterprise app. So
Right.
it's not small parts, but you can learn entire thing and start like writing your enterprise code from the day one. So that's what my focus was on, and uh, it's not edited. So that's the problem. So that's the only thing which is stopping me from actually publishing it. So
Right.
it's without editing, it's like 18 hours, and probably I'll right now just publish it as it is, and then my plan is to actually introduce more concepts. So let's say once we this is done, I'll introduce NX, I'll introduce Ngrx, so people know that okay, in enterprise application generally this is not the way it works, right? So the courses which you see online, they're great, but generally that's not the way it works, right? In enterprises you have different things which you have to take care of, and you need to be aware of those things, why you are writing that particular code, and
Right.
that's where the focus is on. So I'll the idea is, of course, this is Angular getting started course, and then I will like add more things, like introduce state management, introduce NX, and like introduce more solutions around state management. For example, we have RX Angular, but people don't talk about those solutions, right? I mean, there are specific courses for NGRX, but I've never seen a course on an RX Angular.
Yeah.
So, or NGXX. I mean, I still can see some courses on NGXX, but people don't talk a lot about them. So the idea is
Right.
actually progressively introduce them and let people decide, or let people learn that what is best for them.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I've been a huge fan of this idea of like teaching concepts over syntax, because like
Yeah,
it's
excellent.
easy to forget syntax, like how do you make a reducer in NGRX? But the concepts of what a reducer is and why you want to introduce it are very important. So I definitely
Great.
think it's super helpful. So I'm excited for your course. Consider me,
Thank you.
I will sign up for sure. So
Yes.
awesome. Well, hey y'all. This has been an awesome conversation, Santosh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
for everyone watching, thank you for being here. And we'll see y'all next time.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you. Thanks a lot.